Good evening. So I'm going to open a word of prayer, and then we'll go right into it. So Lord, we just want to thank you and praise your name. We're grateful for the privilege to study your word, but also study about the land to which you established the gospel. And you did it first through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then through all those through history. We honor you and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So is there a way we could drop the spots just a little bit? So normally we would be doing this class up in the upstairs classroom, but we experienced a little bit of a roof leak that's been actually probably going on for a while. And we went to fix it, discovered it's full of mold in the side of the building. Well, so we had to strip everything, and so that's out of commission. So all the more argument we need to finish our so we're in here, and so welcome. This is the study of ancient Israel, and for the purpose of this class, there's twofold. Primary purpose of this is to really prepare people that are going in November for Israel. And we are going to do a study tour in Israel, and everything we're going to study over the next 10 Wednesday nights are the locations to which, not all of the locations, but many of the locations that we're going to. And I had the privilege of going to Israel for the first time last April. Of course, I had the advantage of 6 years of Christian college and university training and 20 years of pastoring and studying the Bible, so it was easy to just consume. Some of you have been studying the Bible a long time, but I think as I was going through there, it would have been helpful to have studied more extensively those sites before I went, and then when you're reading and driving and all that. So that's the reason for the class, primary reason. This class is registered under what we call our Life Ministry Institute. And what Life Ministry Institute is it's a Bible institute, an accredited Bible institute that we have partnered with the Federal Way Foursquare Church that has an articulation agreement with our Foursquare College. So in doing so, we are able to provide an accredited college course, which this is actually. And now some of you are like, well, I don't want to go to college, and that's probably fine. So, but in order for us to maintain the accreditation, the designation for everyone either has to be a accredited for college credit or audit. So it can't be either anything. It has to fall in one of those categories. And so we have to actually pay a fee to the college in order to maintain the accreditation site. And so those that are going on the trip, that is built into the cost of the trip. And so those who are not going on the trip, then I believe it's, Mike, how much is it for the audit, the course? $110. So what we'll do is at the end of this tonight, we will send really everybody that's going through the course, whether you're going on the trip or not, we hope you're going on the trip, back with an application. You fill it out. Don't worry if there's something on there you don't understand or don't know, then we're not going to fail you or anything. So but you just fill out the application that goes in back to the school. So with that, so there's really twofold of what this course is. One of the things that I felt I wanted to do, how many are like coffee? How many like coffee? Like 3 of you, 5 of you. Some of you may not be able to drink coffee. But if you are able to drink coffee in the evening, that's even better. I can. I brought back with me on my last trip I know, so when I say it's instant, and you're going to go, oh, but actually this is some of the best instant coffee I've ever tasted, and it's from Israel. And at any point, if you get a little tired and need just a half a cup, these are pretty big cups, but I'd say just a spoon and a half for a full cup. And let me open it. Actually, let me get Garrett, come here for a minute, please. Why don't you just open that up? I think it's sealed. I wanted to give you a taste of Israel if you wanted it. And just, is it open? No, it's, okay, great. So just help you at any point, you can get up and help yourself. And if you would like, at any point as I'm going through this study, you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll stop and sure. Every Wednesday night, once a week for 10 weeks. Okay, for the next 10 weeks, and it will be co-taught. Not just by me, because I'm also have a travel schedule, and there'll be some Wednesday nights where I'm not here. But Pastor Eric who's back there right now. He's working on that. He will also be co-teaching this. Pastor Eric has a degree from Pacific Lutheran University in world history, so he's more than qualified to bring the study of this ancient Israel to you. So I want to start off by just maybe offering a little inspiration. How many have been to Israel already? Well, half of you already. Well, that's great. Then you don't need this inspiration, but for those that haven't, it's my hope that you will consider going. And, as we're going into the end of the month, we're going to be asking for a deposit for those that are going. And that'll be at the end of the month. That deposit will be in the tune of about $300. It's a non-refundable deposit that we have to send into the tour company. So you've got a few weeks to make your final decision, but it's coming up. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is in Psalms 84. And it's really talking about a individual that is making their way to Jerusalem to worship the Lord. And it says in verse 5, it says, "Blessed are those whose strength is in you and have set their hearts on pilgrimage." If there's I think, an appropriate verse for going to Israel, it is a pilgrimage. It is someone on a spiritual journey. Some would say, well, you don't have to go to Jerusalem to be a Christian and be on a spiritual journey. This is true. That is true. It's a true statement. But when you have given the privilege to do it, and you have the unction to do it, and then the opportunity presents itself, what a great gift. And I think the advantage, benefits of going to Israel are pretty simple and obvious. It's hard to understand fully unless you see the topography. When you look at where Jesus taught in the Sea of Galilee, and you end up looking at the where he was looking out over the lake. I call it a lake, you call it a sea. Looking out over it, and you see that, okay, that's what he was seeing, his disciples struggling in the water. You can see stand roughly in the area he was. Suddenly you get a better picture of kind of what it meant when they say they went up to Jerusalem, or down to this place, or up to this place. And I had a topo map, Garrett. I handed you that topo map. What did you do with that? Is it okay? We'll maybe use it next week. It's in the car, so it got left in the car when I handed it to you when we came in. Must got it left there. That's okay. We'll look at it tomorrow. There's a great. I bought it there mainly because it gave such a clear distinction of the topography. We kind of look at a map like that you'll see in a few minutes, just kind of a two-dimensional map, and you don't really get the concept of the terrain that exists in Israel. And that's one of the great benefits, as well as, there is a spiritual encounter that occurs in these places. the electricity of the environment, people who live there probably don't notice it, but someone who walks into it, you do. And it's obvious that, this is the most contested piece of real estate on the planet. And there's a reason people get mad over it. It's because this is where the Lord is going to step next time, bring his foot onto this earth. And so it's a profound place, and I think it can have a profound impact on your walk. If you're going back again, I believe there's, just like anything else, just like reading the Bible, something new will open up. Something new is going to open up to you. And just like you experience something and then you go back to it, there's another layer of understanding God is going to bring to you. So before I move any further, I want to ask you, do you, just very quickly, have any questions in regards to the trip? Any questions? How much walking is involved? There is some walking. I would put it in terms like this: if you can walk 3/4 of a mile on flat surface, you're going to be fine. There'll be times where there'll be some hills, but unlike my tour, which it was like I felt like I was in the military again, we're not going to function that way. We're going to, like, a great example is when we go to Engedi. Engedi's a hike, but not for the first, would you say, almost half a mile. It's literally on a concrete path. I mean, it's a beautiful, and I feel like if there's someone that can't go up the ravine, that there's some really nice spots where we can just, sit down, enjoy yourself. We'll hike up above and come back down. Those kind of moments we'll have, like a place called Timna, same thing. A lot of people just stayed down below. Others went up. So some of the steeper things, you don't have to. I mean, I don't think, not much is lost. My view is don't push it if you don't need to, So we won't, we'll make accommodations the best we can. I would say now's the time to just start walking. Just do a little bit of walking each day. And like I say, if you can just walk 3/4 of a mile on flat surface, level, at whatever speed, you'll be fine. Yeah. Not like, but drizzle on occasion. So of course the weather in southern Israel is quite different from northern Israel. The topography changes. So I would say probably a late spring, early summer for us. Pleasant. November, that'll be, kind of nice for us. So, other questions? We are country, and 14 total with a travel there and a travel back. So, okay, any other questions? All right. So let's go ahead and go right into our study. Now, what I'm going to hand out Can I get a volunteer? And pass that out to everyone if they would, please. And actually, let me have one too so I can track along with it. Yes, everyone, please. So we're going to land in Tel Aviv. There may be a stop along the way, but I think we're making a beeline pretty much to Beersheba, where we'll spend the night. Why don't you put up that first picture, Beersheba? And this this is a significant location in the history of ancient Israel. We are going to, in essence, start at where it started. Now, we can't start in Ur or in Syria, so I'm talking about in Israel. This is the place. Beersheba is, if you could pick any, everybody thinks of Jerusalem and Galilee, but Beersheba is where Abraham got his call. Abraham, it was reaffirmed with, not got his call, but in essence where he established his family, where Isaac was reaffirmed at the covenant, where Jacob was raised, the patriarchs of our faith. This is where they lived. And I'd have to say that there, of the several places that we visited, Sea of Galilee was my favorite. Jerusalem was actually one of my least favorite. We need to go to Jerusalem. You have to go to Jerusalem. We will go to Jerusalem. But in order of what I enjoyed, it's like going to Seattle on steroids. It's like, I would rather go to Sequim, obviously. So like Sea of Galilee is kind of the country, and I like the desert. I was raised in the Tri-Cities, so I like the desert. So I love Beersheba. So some of it has to do with that. But also, I loved the history of the locations and the excavations of these sites. And Beersheba is excavated extremely well. And as they do with many things there, they actually try to preserve the site by actually doing some reconstruction on top of the existing exposed structure. So you'll see what they excavated, and then they extrapolated out what it potentially would be at the next layer, and they actually added masonry to, in essence, protect what they just exposed. And but Beersheba is, I'd say, one of the top locations that I personally enjoyed. It's, when you ask, if you study the history of ancient Israel, of Israel itself, and you go to Abraham, you end up here in Beersheba. But with Beersheba, you have to ask the question, was he the first to arrive, or were there other people there? It does not give us it gives us some indication that there wasn't people, there were not people there when Abraham arrived. A lot of the, if you're wanting to understand the Bible, there's an aspect of understanding the history helps you understand what is being written, so that we can bring timeless kingdom principles 2,000-3,000 years into today. You have a culture, you have a language, you have cities that no longer exist. These scriptures were written in those locations to specific people. And bringing that information, that truth, those principles, those precepts, those commands, those stories, and bringing them to our time, 2018, is, it requires you to build a bridge. It's a bridge of understanding that involves the study of known history. It's the study of the language. It's study of the culture. That's what biblical scholars call exegesis. And any pastor worth any level of education does a biblical exegesis class. He learns to do this. This is a skill that preachers, teachers learn to do, because that's what is necessary to pull out the truth that is embedded in this great, wonderful, holy book that we have called the Bible, and understanding the history. So some of what we're experiencing here is experiencing that. We're experiencing understanding the setting to which this was written. And with ancient Israel, with Beersheba, there is they've excavated. There's debate whether it's there's some substrata, and I'll talk about when I say strata in a few minutes, in a little bit. there is a debate on whether it's 15 layers or 8. Most scholars view it as 8. There's some view that there's actually 15 strata that represent 15 different or 8 different time periods and when they say that, it means one time period occurred, the city was destroyed, the city was built on top of it again, it was destroyed, and so on and so on and so on. Everybody been to underground Seattle? Underground, well, it's kind of like that. You know, they started down here, but they built up. You know, that's kind of the idea. Instead of like 100 years, we're talking 3,000 years, and in the case of Jericho, it's 8,000 years. It's the oldest inhabited city in the world currently. So 8,000 years is a lot of history. There's a lot of stuff under that dirt. But before Israel, before Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they have uncovered in the area very close to this location, just off to the hillside over here, in essence, they're like caves that lead to underground dwellings, and there was a settlement under there. This is before Abraham, and they've named it the Chalcolithic culture. There's not a ton to be known about this group, other than that they were underground dwellers. They did find some evidences of primitive tools and such, but there is, with this culture, this is the only evidence of any inhabitants in Beersheba area at all, other than the time of Abraham. And there is absolutely no connection to any event or people referred to in the Bible. So there's no biblical connection. And part of the reason of that is that they've dated it, that there's potentially 1,000 years between when that settlement was abandoned to the time that Abraham showed up. So there were people there before Abraham, but not for 1,000 years. But 1,000 years prior to that. The Genesis accounts make absolutely no mention of any king or any city in Beersheba at all when Abraham showed up. In addition to that, as they've excavated, there's a complete absence of Middle Age and Late Bronze Age shards, which I'll talk about what a shard is here in a little bit, that support that there were any inhabitants prior to Abraham arriving. In Genesis 21:14, it mentions the wilderness of Beersheba when Hagar was wandering. Remember when she was sent away after the conflict with Sarah. It mentions the wilderness of Beersheba, but it is nowhere mentioned that there was a settlement, there was a city, there was a village, it was just a wilderness. So the only place in that region was a Philistine city called Gerar, and it is mentioned, and it's the place where Abimelech ruled. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And that was pretty much the commercial center, the political center of the area, and Beersheba, the wilderness of Beersheba, was part of their political domain. I don't know what's going on there. We may have to switch mics, but was part of their political domain, but it was not. There was no indication of any city. Now, I was hoping to have my topographical map. Now I realize why I brought it. But okay, what's that? Something's tweaking on this thing. Okay, so I'm gonna, okay, we're gonna pause. Okay, I'm gonna switch mics. Well, I'm not sure. after the treaty had been made at Beersheba, and then that's where it's first called Beersheba, right there, the well of seven. Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his forces, returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham, hear this, planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called upon the name of the Lord. There he called the name of the Lord, the eternal God. It is there. So Elohim, it's at that place where Abraham first calls him the eternal God. When man, we think, yeah, he's the eternal God. Yeah. But it is in that spot those words were uttered first. If that doesn't put goosebumps in the back of your head when you're standing there and you realize this is where it was spoken, it's something. It's something. So that's the first earliest reference to that. Now, this swearing basically established this treaty, and you will find out in a little bit that in fact that had to be reaffirmed under Isaac. They created this covenant agreement to resolve the dispute over in essence water rights, and then he planted a tree. Now it's interesting. One of the neat things about that part of Israel is these tamarisk trees are still around. And I want to show this video. Go ahead.
This is a tamarisk tree.
Drop the lights, please.
It pulls the water and salt out of the air, and it creates a moist shade underneath it, and it is very slow growing.
It's cool underneath.
It's cool underneath because it pulls the air and it makes it like a moist. Often they're found in the desert.
Is this something that is one of your favorite things here?
Yeah, because we saw them all over the wilderness when it was so hot.
So you love this tree.
Yeah, she loved the tree because every time we went, she found the tamarisk trees because they were cool. It literally like an air conditioner, you know. Of course, when we were there, it was in the 90s, and it won't be quite. It'll probably be in the 80s when we're in the Timna area. Bring the lights up, please, if you would. Back up. And so that's a tamarisk tree, and that is exactly what. Now we didn't take the shots down south. Marilyn was like, "Oh, I just wish I could have got a picture of the tamarisk tree," and then where we were at there was Caesarea by the Sea, which I've asked specifically that we will spend more time in the Caesarea by the Sea, because that is absolutely, I think, my number 2 or 3 favorite places. It's just a fascinating city to, where Paul, and that's a whole study on Paul there. So moving on. So we have this incredible moment. Then we have, moving on in Genesis chapters 26, we have Isaac and Abimelech. Now I got to tell you, this is my opinion. It is not thus saith the Lord by any definition. I think Abimelech was probably a pretty good guy. I don't think he was a wicked man. I think he was there's a lot of people that, you got to understand that right now, our faith, as we would call our faith, at this point in history, was pretty much Abraham and his family. So, if you look how Abimelech related to Abraham and to Isaac, and in fact, Abraham and Isaac were dishonest to Abimelech, and Abimelech calls them out of their dishonesty and actually says, "Why would you make me do something wrong?" So I don't know. I mean, I suspect Abimelech is probably sitting in heaven right now. I just suspect that. Everything I read about him, I see a good man. And Jesus died for those who went before him. So by this time there was a famine in the land, and so Isaac ended up having the same interaction with They had moved away, and then they had come back, and we find Isaac back in this region, and he'd moved back here, and I'm missing my particular verse that I was hoping for, but kind of lost it. There it is. Oh, here it is. It's up here in verse 23. From there, he went up to Beersheba. It's verse 23 of 26. That night, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the God of your father, Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you, and I will increase your number of your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham. Isaac built an altar and called on the name of the Lord. There he pitched his tent, and there his servants dug a well. It's, in essence, he redug the well that was filled in. It had gotten filled in. Another discussion of that. So anyways, here we have another reference to, and it's here where he had Jacob and where he had Esau. And this is where that conflict happened, in Beersheba. And, you know, upon Jacob leaving and then eventually coming back 14+ years later, he found that his father Isaac had moved from Beersheba, which we don't have any indication of why. You know, the truth is, these were herders. These were, you know, they moved around. They didn't just stick in one spot. So it's like they were up in Hebron, and this is it's recorded in Genesis chapter 35. And Jacob eventually, after Isaac passed, and of course Jacob ended up leaving for Egypt under Joseph. And so it would be many years before Israel, there was a presence of the Jewish people in Beersheba. And this occurred after the conquest of the land in Joshua. And it became, once they conquered the land from the Canaanites, it became, and in your little outline here, you have all the scripture verses to which Beersheba is mentioned in Judges, in Samuel, in Chronicles, in Kings. And, you know, it makes it very clear that it was its southernmost border. Beersheba was, you know, like I said earlier, it was used often in description of the boundary lines from Dan to Beersheba. We have the same definition being applied in the kingdom of Saul and under the reign of David. Also, this was under Solomon, while his regional influence extended well beyond Beersheba. There was a wider sphere of domain, but it still was defined in 1 Kings as the border of Israel, of the nation of Israel. At the extent Hezekiah, now the king of Judah, sought to expand his influence beyond the borders. So it is, and he made a proclamation in 2 Chronicles chapter 30, you know, from Beersheba to Dan as being his, you know, rule, so to speak. And so again, Beersheba is continually represented the southern limits of Israel's. Jehoshaphat in 2 Chronicles chapter 19 makes it very clear that he exercised his leadership in that region from Beersheba. Under Josiah, King Josiah in 2 Kings chapter 23, an immediate boundaries was reaffirmed, the boundaries of Judah being from Gibeah to Beersheba, and that's defined in 2 Kings chapter 23, verse 8. So then the children of Israel were carted off to Babylon, eventually under the Persians. Nehemiah, you know, we have Ezra coming back, then Zerubbabel, Nehemiah. And in Nehemiah chapter 11, verse 30, there is an indication there was a Jewish settlement still in Beersheba, possibly
that they survived the exile. There's no, but it does reference maybe they decided not to stick around with Nehemiah and headed down to Beersheba. I don't know, but there is an indication. There is a huge amount of political and military value to this site in ancient Israel, and this is where I want to see the map if you would please. Here's the map of Israel. As the divisions are based upon the tribes, and if you can see right, the kingdom of Judah, which is the one that ultimately survived. But in the middle of Judah was the tribe of Simeon. Now, in First Chronicles, it makes it very clear that the Simeonites did not reproduce as quickly as those of the tribe of Judah. And so eventually, over a long period of time, because they didn't have more children, the people of Judah actually became so prominent that they just merged with the tribe of Judah. You know, they say, the lost tribes of Israel. Well, one of them just got lost by sucked into their brother's. That's just, they just didn't have kids. The bottom line. It's very clear. It says that very clear, and as many kids as they should have, and as a result, but that right there, if I can point out it here, let's see if I can. Right there is Beersheba is right there. It's right in the Simeon. So Simeon, the tribe of Simeon, initially took over that, and that basically, once Simeon began to diminish in size, it was affiliated with Judah from that point forward. The towns, it was governed under Joshua from that location. The prophet Samuel, he stationed his sons down there to act as judges, and they became wicked down there. That's where they were doing their wicked things, was in Beersheba. King David designated a capital of that particular region, and so it was governed. So there was like a state capital, if you'd want to say it. And that's mentioned in 1 Kings chapter 4. The prophet Elijah, when he tried to escape Ahab and Jezebel, he first stopped in Beersheba. This is where he stopped to prepare as he went into the wilderness. Joash, the young king prince, who was his brothers were being murdered by the wicked. I guess I forgot how to pronounce her name, but she's like the queen mother, and she was knocking off all the potential political rivals. These little boys, they were little kids. What's that? Athaliah, yes, Athaliah, and he was hidden in Beersheba, and he would later ascend to the throne. King Jehoshaphat, he made Beersheba, and this is recorded in 2 Chronicles chapter 19 again, a political and administrative center. And so through Israel, this was an important, in the nation of Israel and then the kingdom of Judah, this was an important site. I'm giving you kind of a survey to show you that Beersheba is a hugely important piece to our understanding of the Bible. A lot of things happened here. And so after the exile, like I said, you have Nehemiah that came in and governed from Jerusalem, but ultimately there was some. Now, as we move into the intertestamental period after the Old Testament, Edom became the nation of when it starts with an I always draw a blank on it. I'm sorry. Idumeans. It's not Edomites. Idumeans, I think, is the way you pronounce it. It's likely that they took over that. This is speculation, over that area during the intertestamental period. But when the Romans came in, they made Beersheba a major military center on the southern border. Once again, so if the Romans, they were the masters of military strategy. If they made it that's just an asterisk or exclamation mark that this was a critical place. And so now I want to take a few minutes and just ask questions. Maybe, because I'm going to talk about the excavation, because that's what, when you go there, that's what you're going to look at. You're going to look at the excavation of what they found. So, do you have any questions about? I just did a real fast survey of the Old Testament. I think it was both. I mean, the well. We here in Squim, we call water is wealth. That's the same anywhere. And so water, yes, but also if you look at, and this is what, could that map back up if you would, please? And that's why I wanted to get it, that this is a mountain region right through here, okay? It's starting to go down into the plain here. So you still have a high point, but this is where, they potentially are going to have, if you'd bring an army, you'd bring it around this way, or you'd bring it around this way. And if you have a strategic location, you're going to have vantage point coming this way. It's just strategically, militarily a good position to defend, but also to see what's happening. But then there's water, which keeps everybody alive. Any other questions? Is this interesting to you at all? Okay, good. Let's talk about when they start digging. By the way, there was somebody in our church that Ron Erickson actually was a part of the excavation of Beersheba in the early 70s. And he was looking at it and said, it didn't look like that when I was working on it. I said, well, they dug more, and then they added, the protective layer is what they would consider it. And so one of my favorite stories of archaeology is a British archaeologist who was studying in the 1800s. He was studying the route that Alexander the Great took. And so that was his expedition, was just trying to figure out where he camped and, studied his battles. And he was in northern Iraq, or midsection of Iraq, and he came across this plateau, and he theorized this is where at one point Alexander the Great, his army encamped. And it looked like just this plateau hill. So it was a hill, then it was flat. And he thought it was really an odd shape. As he began to look at the topography, it didn't match the surrounding areas. So they began to dig. And what they discovered was the city of Nineveh that are mentioned in the Bible. Many people believe, and always dreamed of going on an archaeological dig after that class. Never 30 years to bring it to this place right here of steady, literally with spoons and little brushes, little bits at a time. Just army of students that come in, and a lot of people and they discovered the streets, and they discovered all kinds of different things, and they found these different. And I'll stick with the International Bible Encyclopedia's description of 8 strata. There's others that argue for, on site they say there was 15, but mainly 8 large strata. And like I say, a strata is basically a time period of the existence of a civilization in that site. That's what the term strata means. And as they go down, they discover pottery. They typically, carbon dating is used, but the predominant way for archaeologists to discover proximate time periods of these strata is not carbon dating. It's pottery. Because they have figured out over, and I won't go into the detail because I'm not an archaeologist, how different time periods of history, how pottery was made. And as they dig down, the types of pottery, how it's made, how it's formed, how it's kindled, how all of that changes over time. And so they're able to say, well, this is this time period because this is the pottery that was found in this. And what you will discover in Israel is everywhere you go, there's pottery shards everywhere. One of the things I'm going to give to you today for coming, there's some people that are going to go on this trip that are not here. They're not getting this, so you get it. I'm going to give each one of you, and I believe I have enough for everybody, a pottery shard from Israel that I picked off the ground. This one, which I'm not giving to you, I picked off I dug down right about to the level where it was, and by the way, no one cares because there's so many. If you find something with writing on it, they want it. But, I mean, you know what I'm talking about. It's everywhere. So I scratched back, and I found, this is from the city of Hazor, which was destroyed in 722 BC. And this is probably about at least 2,700 years old right here. And, but this is a shard right here. This is a shard. And so when they find a shard, they're able to determine the time frame to which that period, that civilization lived. And so, by the way, before you leave, I'm putting this out, especially for those that are believing to go, that this will be your faith shard. That you will have this and say, Lord, I am going to Israel. You will put this in your Bible next to your nightstand. Just be praying. I'm going to Israel. Go ahead. You know, they're different. If you look at different, it's not all one plaque. This is only a portion of Beersheba. What I found is that it's excavated at different levels, and so they went down further in some areas. They stopped in certain areas, and so there's a method. But you know, like you say, I mean, if you kept digging, what else are you going to find? Yeah, yeah. That's, you know, the Ark of the Covenant's under there. No, I'm just kidding. There were, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. Yes, underneath the city, there's an entire drainage system underneath this site. So they had that when they constructed the city, they constructed it with that kind of thinking. I mean, this is so let this sink in. Abraham founded this place. He is the founder of Beersheba. So in the lowest level, the strata 8, the main strata, they found pottery shards that dated to the 12th century BC, which is about potentially time Abraham would have been. Now, they found a lot of Philistine articles which would also correlate with the Old Testament stories. So there's some Philistine influence. Before the kings, 12 BC to 1000 BC was strata 6 and 7. Strata 5 and 4 and 5 was the time of the United Monarchy. And it's here there was the first clear evidences that the city was destroyed by fire. It was rebuilt in the 9th century. Strata 3, the city suffered again a severe destruction, but it was not burned. But in Strata 2, the city was Israelite city was the last Israelite city in this location was destroyed by fire, and that actually time that occurred correlates with the destruction of Lachish. Now, if you know your Bible's history, Lachish was reported, the fires of Lachish are reported from Jerusalem, and that's when Sennacherib, the Assyrian king, marched through and actually subjugated the northern kingdom, which means he went into other parts of Judah, and such as Beersheba, and brought destruction. So this city was probably sacked by the Assyrians in 702, 701, 702 PC. The last strata, the best way they describe it is it just was a poor attempt of inhabitants to try to reoccupy a destroyed city that never really took. So, they found very clear fortified centers, as you can see, very clear, distinct streets, foundations, homes. They uncovered plaster paintings. And by the way, you won't see a lot of those things there because they're removed and they're taken to the museum in Jerusalem. So an example would be like when we visit Chorazin, which is one of the Galilean cities. You'll be in a synagogue, and they have what's called the Bema seat, and then the seat of Moses. They excavated the seat of Moses, which is basically where the Bema is, where the teacher would teach from, he would read the law from, and then he would go sit in what's called the seat of Moses and teach from a seat. They found that. They found the seat of Moses in that synagogue, which Jesus would have sat. And by the way, the Bema is still there, and you can stand literally in the location that Jesus stood. I mean, and know for sure Jesus stood on that spot. That's a whole nother. Some people won't stand on it, but I was like, let me stand on it, I want to be where Jesus was. But when they find something like that significant, they actually, the Jewish nation, Israel, has done a great job of removing those items and taking them to a place where they can be preserved and not just exposed to the elements. So, a lot of figurines, a lot of cultic figurines, little pagan gods. They found a lot of those things, miniature incense altars. They did find a Hebrew inscription and that said holy. I mean, if you think about how long that is, that they found anything that had writing on it is something. But they also found a lot of etchings of personal names, complete lists of storehouses. What was they categorized what was kept. They must have had an accountant with them, I guess. The types of commodities they had, wines, grains, and where they came from. And in these lists that they found in Beersheba correlate to the Old Testament in the types of, commodities that were grown or managed in those areas. The Old Testament is listed in these archaeological finds. So it's just one more evidence of the authenticity of the Bible. But the most if you want to say, the most amazing discovery on that site was the ashlar stones from a dismantled altar. And what that means is this. Put this up there. This is a ashlar. This is an altar where. This right here is what's called an ashlar stone. So this is actually when it talks about they did not remove the high places. This is what they're talking about. Okay? No, this is a replica. What they found in Beersheba, the ruins, is they found these little stones right here. I mean, you had to have known what it was when that's why these guys study they can figure out, well, this is what this is. There's 4 of these. That means because they have found these altars intact in other locations. What were the Israelites doing with this? Well, so let's just build our own right here, and we'll worship God. Boy, that sounds American, doesn't it? And we'll just do it our way, It's humanity. That's humanity. So that's what they would do. They'd build these things so that they'd still feel good about themselves. They're worshiping God, sacrificing to God in something that's similar. And so this wasn't a pagan altar. It was a high place that wasn't supposed to be. It wasn't following the law. So that said, they found one there. So anyways. So I could just keep going and going, but I'm going to kind of wrap up with that. And so this is our first stop. This is Beersheba. Questions? What's that? Oh, questions. It could be little brother and just Beersheba. Sometimes they replace it with replicas. Yeah. Right, and we actually will go to the Israel Museum. So it's huge, just like any national museum. What we're going to try to do with this trip is visit, make sure that some of the things that we see, like example would be the seat of Moses in Chorazin. We never got actually a chance to look at it. We kind of rushed in and rushed out. I really, really want us to be able to see a couple of those sites so that so the answer to your question is they put some replicants out. As a matter of fact, I believe there was I can't remember the name of the outpost. It was an outpost that David built, and there was a replicant, one of those high places, and they had dismantled and taken to the National Museum in Jerusalem, but they put a replicant out so you could see what was there. So. Mm-hmm. I mean, looking at the text, I think it really had to do with, this is somewhat I'm making some assumptions in this statement. I think God showed Abraham that dig right here for some water. He's looking at the topography, and there's two wadis that come right to that location. There would have been a pooling of water that would have seeped into the ground and created a natural aquifer just probably 30, 40 feet down. And no one had dug there up to that point because there isn't any indication of any other civilization up to that point. And so it's, he's herding his sheep through his goats and his sheep or whatever, his animals, and he needs water. And so he digs there, has the conflict with the Philistines, and creates that treaty with Abimelech. So I think that's initially why Beersheba was there. But as time would go on, the kings, the armies also saw a strategic location for their armies, and that's why it became an administrative and military political position. Does that make sense? Well, okay, this will be helpful to you. Right behind us, you get the person that's taking the picture, right behind them is the city of Beersheba. There is a modern city. No, no, go ahead. Yes. They're pretty they govern it well, I guess is the best way to say it. Here's a great illustration of, because a lot of private land in Israel, but there's a law, it's governed by the Antiquities Department, that if you start digging, there is an antiquities person there from the government. One of my favorite stories when they found, when we weren't planning on doing this, and you guys didn't experience, unless you've been to Israel in the last 2 years, you wouldn't have experienced this, because this is new. The Catholic Church was building a prayer retreat on the Sea of Galilee, and the priest that was governing the project, that did the the traditional turn the shovel, said this prayer, said, "Father, let there be nothing under the ground, but if it is, make it good." That was his prayer. And they started digging. Mary Magdalene wasn't her last name. It was Mary from Magdalene. And there's a whole story in that, and we will actually visit that. And that is probably one of the neatest visits. That's why I love the Sea of Galilee, because they're always uncovering stuff. So that's a long answer to tell you that they are really on it when it comes to this stuff. And when there's some sites like I don't want to say Arad, it's another city that's mentioned when the raiders from Mesopotamia came and captured Lot, or captured it was Lot and some of the family members and servants, and Abraham got 418 men and chased them. He came to this one particular city. I want to say it's Arad. I could be wrong on that. And it's only mentioned once in the Old Testament. And he went to the gates to inquire where they went. And then they told him, and off he went. Well, they found that city, the gates. So you literally can stand where Abraham was asking the question. However, it's completely covered. They built this huge cover over the city because it's clearly it wouldn't last. And you can't walk up and down those stairs. But some of them you can. I mean, the other thing is there's so many. There's so many. Some that they designate more important than the other. The city of Capernaum is owned by the Catholic Church. And they have done a great job at preserving Peter's house. And they've done a great job at preserving the synagogue there. But it's pretty well developed. They've got a nice little commercial entity going there. So, I mean, it's developed. But the important pieces are pretty well preserved. Is this answering your question? Yeah, I'm sure there's all varying degrees. I think one of my, the Jewish people are incredibly resourceful of preserving and then also creating opportunity. They are. It's a great example is when they after this 7-day war, which is a 67-day war, 1967. Where they recaptured Jerusalem, okay? and they were able to go back into the old Jewish quarter, which had been destroyed in the 1948 and the independence, and they lost that part of Jerusalem. There had been Jews living in the Jewish quarter for 1,000 years prior to that. I mean, nobody talks about that, but and what the Arabs did is they destroyed it, physically destroyed it, and then funneled all the sewage from the rest of the city to that location intentionally. So when the Israeli army recaptured it, it was just destroyed. So they started digging. And this is one that you guys probably wouldn't have experienced as well. I don't know if did you guys get to go to Caiaphas's house? Okay, you did, Mike. Caiaphas's. They discovered, they didn't call it Caiaphas's because they were on the verge of declaring it formally as Caiaphas's house when we were there, but they hadn't. I went to our tour guy, I said, I'm looking at this has got to be Caiaphas's house. And he goes, it is. They're just not well, I think this fall they did and formally declared it that this was Caiaphas's house. Well, they began to go down to bedrock in the Jewish quarter, and they found that. So what did they do? They preserved it, they cataloged it, they excavated out, they pulled out the items of value, and then they built these massive pylons and built a city on top of it. So you go underground and walk through this whole maze and so they repopulated the Jewish quarter, and yet they still preserved the ancient house where Jesus was brought and his trial occurred, and where Peter denied Christ. When you realize you're standing in the courtyard, or in the courtyard where literally where Peter denied Christ, you realize it wasn't like the movies. They were like probably 15 feet from each other. It's a lot smaller than you think. Yeah. So is that somewhat answer your question? Yeah. So I'm sure there. Oh, yeah, like me. You know what? You realize how many there are. Am I wrong? It's like half the dirt is shards. 10,000 years of pottery. They don't. They're like, it's not an issue. It's kind of like apples for us, I think. No. Anyways, feel free. I'm going to conclude with this. By the way, those are the only ones I have. I really don't care, because after a while you're looking at just pieces of it. But I think for you it could be a point of faith, saying I'm going to go back, and you could go put it back. So I'm going to conclude with that. Next week we will, I believe. Oh, let me give you the. We're going to study the wilderness of Zin and a few other locations. But here is the syllabus for the course. Now, I'm going to just take one, and you want to pass this around for me. So if you end up taking it for credit, which many of you may not, then you'll have to do the homework. But if you're not, then you don't have to do the homework. If you just audit it. Again, if you're owing on the trip, it's part of the cost of the trip. So, and the lessons will follow. So next week, we're going to talk about Joshua and Arad and Tel Jellicoe and the Hittites. We'll focus on probably one or two of those as it relates to where we're going to visit. So, okay? Does it get you a little excited about going? Okay, so if you feel free, come over, grab yourself a shard. That's yours to keep, and take it.